Well, I would love to jump into these areas. I mean, everything from, the minimum wage, wage theft, all of these things, because I think these are things that we hear a lot about. But I think majority of us don't know the intricate details. So I would love to jump into, minimum wage. That has the $15 law been implemented yet, or is it over a couple years? Is that right? By what year are we supposed to hit the 15 mark?
By 2020.
By 2020, yeah. So we're pretty much what point are we supposed to be at right now?
We're at the halfway point.
Like 13 or
I don't totally
around
remember.
there, yeah, somewhere between 7 and 15. Got it.
No, we started off higher because 7 is the national.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were going more from like 10 to 15.
Okay.
In California.
In California.
Yeah.
And then the national is still 7 something.
National is still 7.
Still 7
yeah.
something.
So, I mean, that's an interesting, like what happened with minimum wage in this country in general is the federal did not move. And so first cities started to do it, like a city here, a city there. And then I think there was like this interesting moment where LA was doing it. And then, in these kind of more progressive spaces, the state was like, oh, no, we got to get on this. And so they passed it kind of, I don't remember if it was like right before or right around the time, but the state got in on it. And they're like, no, we're going to pass the $15 minimum wage. And I think they did it like a couple of hours after New York did.
Oh, really?
Because New York was like, no, we're going to pass the state
it's like a
minimum
race.
wage. It
That's
was
funny.
and I'm like, I love when states compete for good things, where they really want it to be the, like, get there first kind of thing. And I don't know if that was the intention, but that was definitely what
sure.
it looked like.
Yeah.
And then after that, like, there's definitely like more challenging, like places in the South, for example, where the cities would pass it and the state would come and say, like, actually you can't. And they would do something called state preemption, which is states can pass a policy and override something that the cities are doing. So there was both movements happening where some folks were like, let's push this forward, and other was like, we're not going to stop. And I think that's like a little bit of our sadly very like polarized world, especially in this like world in labor where, certain states are like, they're setting the model for like, let's make work better for everybody. And then there's an older model that's been completely about disempowering disempowering labor and then kind of just annihilating labor standards. And they want to keep that going. And I feel like that's the tension we're still seeing today.
Well, what was the motivation behind, it's probably so obvious to you, but what's the motivation behind having a minimum wage in the first place?
Yeah. So we didn't have one actually till not so long ago. Like it was actually kind of the mid 1940s where we started to, implement a lot of the labor protections you see today. And kind of before that, it was kind of like a free for all when it came to work. And that, that's where you saw like the little girls in the garment factories and the fires and the child labor and like girls, like working 20 hours days and no breaks and, you're like sewing. And that's where you saw some of the worst conditions. And it was probably around the New Deal era where like lots of things came into place. So that's where you got the limit on the hours, the 8-hour workday, the minimum wage. And then you got other kinds of protections like overtime. And there's this thing called the National Labor Relations Board that was created that's supposed to like make sure, like kind of be like our board for the way we like think about labor. And unions were strong. They had like a pretty like good foothold in like the decision making around, creating good jobs. You had government that actually like did a lot of regulation. And some people call like the 1940s to the 1970s as the golden age, because that's one of the few periods in our history where we had the least amount of income inequality.
Really?
And during that time, unions and labor were strong.
So pretty much right after the war.
After the war.
So about the 70s.
New Deal, yeah. All the way to the 70s. And, I mean, it's like, you must remember these images of like the middle class, you know, like the images of you get the washing machine
Oh,
now,
sure. Yeah,
and the
50s,
kitchen,
typical
and
50s. Yeah.
you had your person working at the Ford plant who had decent wages so that you could buy a house. You know, you could send your kids to college because not only were you making decent wages, school was not as, you know, did not have the kind of skyrocketing costs it does today. So you can own a house, you have a decent wage, and it's not that like I'm gonna glamorize like a factory job, but it's the fact that everything around it was good. You know, you had a middle class life as a factory worker. Like, just to even imagine that today, that's like you
Sure.
could have a factory job or some kind of, you know, now we call them low wage job, but like some kind of like job where you can still buy a house, send your kids to school, and then retire with a pension.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching the episode. If you're interested in contributing to the conversation and supporting the show, there's 2 easy things you can do. 1, click subscribe, and 2, visit our Patreon page where you get exclusive access to the Exploring Minds community.